this evening, this is a continuation of, well, it's in a series of matters of prophecy. And this concerns that of Christ's enemies, that his enemies are in prophecy. And it just goes like this. When you have the prophecies of Christ, when they deal with him, of where he will be born, what nation is he going to be born in, what's the family he's going to be born in, what is the very tribe, what is the time, all of these things, there's also included in that, outside of what he's going to do, and all matters concerning him, there's going to be other things that are going to be prophesied as well. Last week we spoke of his church being prophesied and going through only a few prophecies. There's more that we could have spoken of, more that we could have brought out. This evening we're going to look at his enemies, because his enemies are mentioned in prophecy. And it is true. God reveals how Christ would be received centuries before it happened. And I want you to understand that you can, and we make mention of this, you cannot fake this. You do realize that the prophecies of the Old Testament, meaning everything from the Old Testament, is known to have existed. We can prove it outside of the biblical text. We can prove that the Bible, the Old Testament, existed by 250 BC. We know that. We don't have to have the Dead Sea Scrolls. We wouldn't know about that and come across as 47, 48, something like that. 1947, 1948, somewhere along that line. Now that is a lot of evidence right there, but we can know by way of the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament, of which we have existing today. It records all the Old Testament, including the prophecies. It records it all. And let's face it, you cannot predict the future 250 years before it occurs, so why not just go ahead and admit that any prophecy that Moses wrote would have to be like 1300, 1400 BC. Just go ahead and admit it. Any prophecy that Daniel wrote would have to be around 600 BC. Anything that David wrote, about 900 to 1000 BC. All these things are provable. Now, let's look at this, and we will notice that there is not what may be called, you may have heard the term, maybe not. I'll explain what it means. It is a literary term, and it's purple literature or purple prose. Purple prose is where you make something very sort of dramatic and sort of heroic, and it's just kind of over the top heroism or over the top. It's been romanticized greatly. Whatever it is has been greatly romanticized to where that doesn't sound real. It probably wasn't. But the Bible doesn't present such things. It never writes in such a way. Apocalyptic literature is not purple prose. And prophecy is not purple prose. And we don't get anything out of prophecy that it would sound like when the Christ comes to the earth that everything is going to be perfect. Everything, now in certain ways it is, but I mean that Christ would have no enemies. Everyone would adore him. Everyone would fall at his feet and worship him. But they don't. Not everyone would believe him. We have Isaiah 53:1. Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Now it continues on from this, speaking concerning the Christ. But already we can see just in the beginning of this chapter that who has believed our report? And the answer is very few. Very few have believed our report. And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? It has been revealed, but did all of them believe? And the answer is, in fact, no. They didn't. some would in fact reject him. We just go to verse 3. We're still Isaiah 53. He is despised and rejected by men. So if we go back, who has believed our report? Well, it would seem not very many. Not very many believed our report, though it has been revealed. All right, he's despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. So this doesn't sound like something man would create. If you've ever heard, I know you've read it, read of like legends and lore of people of the past, and they may not have even existed. Some of the things that have been given, and it just comes off as grandiose. It comes off as no one was better than this person, or no one faced the terrors of this person of this time, and all of these things going on and on. The Bible doesn't present the Christ in that way, because he's not going to be received that way. He's not going to be received as the Son of God upon the earth, and everyone accepts that. He is the Son of God upon the earth, but he's rejected by men. And we see right here, he's acquainted with grief, despised. We hid our faces from him. What is that? Why would you do that? You don't want the truth, is why. You don't want the truth. You don't want to admit that Jesus of Nazareth is the Christ, because once you do that, you got to follow him. And that may mean losing some friends. That may mean losing your place in society. That may have been a comfortable place. May mean losing some family members, or maybe all the family members. And so, nope, not going to do it. And we did not esteem him. He's just the carpenter's son. Nothing greater than that. Don't we have his sisters and his brothers here living with us? He's nothing more than just another Nazarene. That's it. Nothing greater than that. Now, Christ would suffer at the hands of his enemies. We already see that he's despised. He's not believed. He's despised. But yeah, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearer is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Now we can show, well, yeah, that is exactly what Christ did. He went to the cross, and he's not kicking and screaming. And he's not demanding a lawyer. He is going quietly. But what we want to focus on is his enemies put him there. And it speaks of it, that he is in fact oppressed, he's afflicted, and who's doing it? Well, it's men who are doing it. Now, he was taken from prison and from judgment, and who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. And what does that mean? That means he was killed. That's exactly what that means. Someone is taken from the land of the living, there's only one conclusion: they're dead. Or at least they were murdered. That is the definition in how one would, that's the conclusion you'd come to. Now, Christ would be rejected by his brothers. Now, Psalm 69, verse 8, I have become a stranger to my brothers and alien to my mother's children. And of course, one may read Psalm 69 and be unaware that this would apply to the Christ, may be unaware that it does. But the New Testament most definitely tells us that's exactly what this was. This is, as a matter of fact, it wasn't too long ago that we were looking at some of the things in Psalm 69, and that it concerns the Messiah. It is as though it were written by the Christ. Now, I've become a stranger to my brothers. So his brothers didn't believe him. Christ would suffer at the hands of Jewish and Gentile leaders. Now, it's getting kind of specific here. It's not just ambiguous people. It's not kind of vague in all this, but it's going to tell us who is going to be involved, not by their names, but by a segment inside society. Psalm 2 and verse 1. Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? So, all right, we're going to see what they're raging against and what they're plotting against. They're plotting against Jehovah and His Christ. That's who they're plotting against. But notice, the nations, that's Gentiles. The people, that's Israel. They are joining forces. Pilate and Herod hated each other until it came to the crucifixion of Christ. Then somehow these two men who really had no use for the other, suddenly they became friends. They're united against God. That's their unity. They're united against Him. And so you have that also the Sanhedrin court, the high priest, you have the scribes, you have the elders of the people. All of them are going in on this. And yes, they are plotting a vain thing. Let's look at what that vain thing is. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord. That is, now I'm bringing this from the New King James, but the American Standard 1901 would give a more accurate depiction of that word Lord, that is Jehovah, against Jehovah and against his anointed, against His Christ. That word in Hebrew is Messiah. Against Jehovah and against His Messiah, saying. So this is the vain thing. They're plotting against God and His Christ. Now that is, in fact, a pointless endeavor. We can make illustrations such as taking a broom, going over to the Atlantic Ocean, and sweeping the ocean away. Okay, good luck in that. That would be a vain thing to do, because you're not going to succeed. Or that you are somehow going to change the direction of the orbits of the planets. All right, you're not doing it. You can't do it. You cannot slow the earth, you cannot speed the earth up, nor can you speed up the moon or Mars. None of that. Now, how do you think you're going to be able to succeed even when you take the kings and the rulers, you gather together and do all these things against God and against His Christ? Well, it's going to fail, and it does fail. It's going to, they want to, well, let's just show the motive. This is what they're saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. That is their motivation. They don't want to be under God. They don't want His laws. They want their own. They don't want to follow Jehovah, nor do they want to follow Christ. And as Jesus stated on more than one occasion, if you accept Him, you accept the one who sent Him, which is the Father. And if you accepted, if you already accepted the Father, you would accept Him. Which means that those that rejected Christ, they already had, less than a faithful life, less than a faithful heart. They weren't actually following the Father. Now, one can do it all just in an instant of accept Christ and accept the Father, regardless of background. And we see plenty of people that in fact did that, where they are sinners and they come to Christ. All right, they do that. And when you accept Christ, you accept the Father. When you accept the Father, you must accept Christ. They are joined. You can't have one without the other, and you cannot reject one without rejecting the other. Now, Christ would be betrayed by a friend. So we see where His brothers didn't believe in Him. We see where the Jews, both Jews and Gentiles, are going against him. And we didn't really mention the Gentiles, that of Pilate. We mentioned him by name. But it's the Romans that were there. They are being manipulated. You know, the Romans don't have a problem crucifying somebody. And someone like Pilate, if it's for the sake of something political, he doesn't mind killing somebody. I mean, never think that there's a whole lot of good in some of these men that we see among the Roman governors and the like. Now, some of them seem to be. Some of them seem to be. But others, you can see someone like Felix. Felix waiting for a bribe. All right, Felix wasn't exactly a good man doing that. But here you have, he's being betrayed by a friend. Psalm 41:9, even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. We've talked about Judas on numerous occasions. And here's a prophecy concerning him. A prophecy that was missed by the apostles and probably missed by most people in the day. Because when Christ speaks of being betrayed and that one of the apostles would do it, they were very much surprised, shocked, and in dismay. But here it is in plain sight. Here it is to let you know that is going to happen. And it is someone who is a familiar friend. Was there a friendship between Jesus of Nazareth and Judas Iscariot? Yes, there was. If there was no friendship, if there was enmity between the two, it would not have been a betrayal. Your enemy doing something against you is not betraying you. That's your enemy doing something wicked against you. Your friend, a close family member, someone close to you who you trust, there's the key. Someone who you have entrusted with something, who does something against you, that's a betrayal. And that's exactly what Judas does. He's lifted his heel against me. Now, Christ's friend would make money from the betrayal. So Judas is going to make money. And we can see that. Zechariah 11:12. Then I said to them, if it is agreeable to you, give me my wages, and if not, refrain. So they weighed out for my wages 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, this is Jehovah said to me, throw it to the potter. All right, that's a peculiar thing to say. Why would you be given 30 pieces of silver for wages, and then Jehovah tells you to throw it to the potter? And this is a continuation of what Jehovah said, that princely price they set on me. Now, I understand that the New King James has put the end of that quotation at potter, but I don't think that's correct. I think that the closed quotation mark should be on the end of there, at the end of that sentence, me. That princely price they set on me. That's Jehovah talking. Is Jehovah, let's just explain this for a second, does not just mean the Father. Jehovah can mean the entire Godhead. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And matter of fact, we can prove that. This is one of those places that would prove it. Well, who was the princely price they set on me? That was the price they set on Jesus for Judas to betray him. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord for the potter. That makes even less sense. Jehovah told you to give that to the potter, throw it to the potter, and then you go to the temple. You threw it in the house of the Lord. You threw it in the temple for the potter. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I have you know, I have a Jewish Old Testament. It would be one commonly found in synagogues today. That with statements, prophecies such as this, they know for a fact, if you know anything about the life of Jesus of Nazareth, you'd know that's speaking about him. You'd know that be about his betrayal. And that's Judas Iscariot who did that. And therefore, they have to say, because this doesn't make any sense until you get to the New Testament and you see what happened. Because of that, they just say, meaning of Hebrew unknown. You're lying to us. It is known. You know what the words say. You just don't like the words. And you refuse to acknowledge them. Christ would be crucified while surrounded by enemies. Many bulls have surrounded me. Strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. This is Psalm 22, beginning in verse 12. They gape at me with their mouths like a raging and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It has melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue clings to my jaws. You have brought me to the dust of death. Now, as we have explained before, Psalm 22 sounds like the one who's on the cross wrote this while on the cross, but that's an impossibility. You can't write while you are nailed to a cross. This was written about 900 years before we get to the cross. And here we see a description from the one who's on the cross of what's occurring to him, first-hand knowledge. For dogs have surrounded me, the congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Is that poetic? No, it's not. Now, talking about dogs and talking about bulls and talking about lions, that's metaphorical language. That's poetic description. But they pierced my hands and my feet, that is literal. And also, my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth, that's very literal. I can count all my bones. They look and stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. This is happening all around him. Meanwhile, he can say, Lord, forgive them. They know not what they do. All of this going around him, from the wagging of the beards, to the blasphemous things being stated, to the various things that seem just out of joint. And I mean of, if you think that he could be the Son of God, you wouldn't be doing this, but you do it anyway. If you think that he could call Elijah down, if you think that's even possible, why'd you put him on the cross? Because they're discussing that. All right, and so we see among all these things at the bottom of the cross, at the base of that cross, they're casting lots for his clothing. Well, who's doing that? Because in David's day, when Psalm 22 was written, nobody did that, because that's a Roman thing. The Israelites didn't do that. Nobody in Israel would have been doing such a thing, and most certainly David is not talking about himself. Zechariah 12:10, continuing on in this. And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. So there are those around that cross. You have those that are the bulls of Bashan. Then you have these others that they're not quite like that. They may have said, "Crucify him." They may have yelled it loudly. But they realize, I do believe, that they may have done something very dire. They may have done something exceedingly wicked, mourning for him as one mourns for an only son. Not all of them were those dogs, but there were dogs there. And let's just say this. Those that said, "Crucify him," would be just as guilty as the ones who were trying to rile the people up. You're following the wrong voice. The prophecies of Christ's enemies. There's more. There's a whole lot more that we can look at in the prophecies and those that would oppose him. But here's just a brief look, going from that of generally there'd be many that wouldn't believe him. His own brothers would not accept him. Now, after his resurrection, they changed their mind on that. They then understood. And you have that of being betrayed by a friend, and that of the rulers, both Jew and Gentile, going against him. It's one thing after another, after another, after another, and it's all there. And one could say it was hidden in plain sight. Well, yeah, it's been there for centuries. It's been there for centuries, and has been there for anyone to look at and to see the power of God's Word. It's not a minor thing. It speaks now of one more prophecy that is yet to take place. We're in a time period where we know there will be no more prophets. So no more books of the Bible. That's completed. We know that. That was completed in the first century. Nothing else is left to be fulfilled except Christ's return. And he will. And all of this material realm will be burned up. Absolutely consumed by a fervent heat to where the elements melt. A very powerful wording there. And Christ will return to judge. Right now, he offers grace and salvation. Right now, he offers to be our advocate. Right now, he offers us every spiritual grace and mercy and every spiritual blessing. He offers it now. You accept it now, you've accepted it at the right time, because when he returns, it's too late. After we die, it's too late. It's over. And the door is shut. And there is no opening that door back up. It's done. So you do what you can now. And it's a matter of the will. Nothing else. And Satan will occupy every second of your life, every second of your thought, if you let him. He'll do it. But it might be worth your while to take some time and learn what God has done for us and our future. We ask this evening, if you need to respond to the invitation, if we can help you in any way, that you come as we stand and sing.